Hey, if you'd like to earn CEUs for this webinar, join the Safeopedia community at the link in the description below. Now on to the show.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar. We'll just give everybody a second here to get settled. Really excited for you to join us today. We're wherever you're joining from across the globe or right next door. We're honored you're spending your time with us today. My name's Scott Cuthbert, co-founder of Safeopedia. And at Safeopedia, our mission is to support and uplift safety leaders with knowledge, resources, and community they need to make the workplaces safer. So before we get into the webinar, I just want to thank everybody for the tireless work that you do. It's often behind the scenes, invisible to some, but important. It keeps our families, communities, and organizations safe. And thank you so much for the work that you do. So a little housekeeping for today's webinar. At the bottom of the screen, you should see more and 3 little dots. If you go in there, you'll see Q&A. So we'll ask you to put any of your questions at any point in the webinar in the Q&A section, and then we'll do our best to get to all the questions at the end of the presentation. So today's webinar is how confident are you in your protection apparel selection? So this webinar has been made possible from the support of DuPont, a preferred manufacturer member of the AD Safety Network and longtime partner of Safeopedia. And our presenters today are Aaron Richard and Mark Tartaliega. Did I get that right? who will dive into selecting the right protective apparel in chemical manufacturing. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron and Mark to kick things off. I think Mark's going to be the first presenter today.
Indeed, that's the case. So thank you, Scott, and appreciate everybody here today. Again, no matter where you are around the globe. Looking at our agenda, we will start with an introduction to the industry we're focused on today, which is chemical manufacturing. And we'll provide an overview of why chemical protective apparel is important to keep workers in this industry safe. Next, we'll talk about the aspects involved with the selection of protective garments, hazard risk assessment, selection considerations, and addressing some of the challenges you folks are faced with. Then we'll dive into how DuPont can help address some of these challenges to help you as the end users be successful. And this is with sharing our SafeSPEC and SafeGUIDE tools. We'll subsequently do a deeper dive into the SafeGUIDE tool, and we'll walk through a case study from the chemical manufacturing industry and discuss the benefits of the program. And finally, we'll get to what we're selling, which is hazard-based protective apparel solutions, which SafeSPEC and SafeGUIDE will help you identify. And finally, we'll wrap up with a summary, talk about next steps, and launch into some Q&A. Next slide, please. So first up, we'll discuss an overview of the chemical industry and how to select effective protective apparel. Next slide. Okay. Sorry about that. So recently, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which takes a look at injuries throughout the industry, did a survey where they identified thousands of chemical and thermal burn injuries that were identified across the chemical industry. And some of these were associated with fire or explosion incidents. We're all aware of the wide-ranging chemicals being handled on a routine basis in this industry. And it's a broad range of corrosives, toxic materials, inflammable materials. So the main takeaway we have is that in this particular industry, there are many different dermal hazards present that require a range of chemical protective garments to help keep workers safe. And you'll see by the end of this presentation that DuPont has the product portfolio to meet these needs. Next slide, please. Excuse me. I'm having trouble on my end. I apologize for that. So the first thing we're going to discuss again is our hazard risk assessments and the importance of them. We are confident that everybody realizes that we need to do these before we are starting our tasks. And what we'd like to focus everybody's attention on is how to do the assessment. And this starts out with identifying hazards for each activity, as well as the exposure scenario to be assessed, considering questions like this. How is the worker exposed? In other words, what type of exposure is taking place? Is it dermal? Is it inhalation? Is it both? And also, where on the body will the individual be exposed? Additionally, how much exposure can we expect? What's the concentration or intensity of the hazard? How long will the individual be being exposed? How frequently will they be exposed? And it's also important to consider things like environmental conditions, temperature, humidity, pressure, which also can have an impact on the risk. And finally, the collected information needs to be analyzed to determine and implement an exposure control strategy, which PPE is just one of those components. Next slide, please. But before we get into the selection of PPE, we have to talk about the hierarchy controls, because we're all aware that PPE really is our last line of defense. So once we've completed the hazard identification and risk assessment steps, you need to apply the hierarchy of controls to develop your exposure control strategy in order to minimize risks associated with the work. So even after applying the higher levels of control, elimination, substitution, engineering controls, and administrative controls, we know that oftentimes the PPE is still needed to control those residual risks. Next slide, please. So when we talk about selecting protective apparel, we like to think about three key considerations: protection, durability, and comfort. And we also need to think of these considerations also as a hierarchy. So consequently, really, protection is the first, again, because it's the most important. Will the garment provide protection needed against the hazards you identified during the hazard assessment? Do you have access to data information that's needed to support the PPE that's selected? So again, we're assured that it's going to protect against those hazards. Durability is an important consideration because it can impact how often you're replacing garments. In other words, are you changing out garments multiple times between a task or a shift? And this can have impact on protection as well as having productivity and cost implications. And then comfort, obviously, is also an important consideration because we know that the comfort of workers can impact compliance and overall productivity and morale. Heat stress is a concern, and oftentimes PPE can play a role in contributing to it. So it's important to implement other programs and procedures to mitigate those risks for heat stress illnesses. Ultimately, it's important when you're assessing different garments to try and find the best balance of protection, durability, and comfort. Next slide, please. All right, so here's our first poll question for the audience. So we're asking you, what is your biggest challenge when selecting chemical protective apparel? And again, you can select all that apply. So we got confirming compatibility and permeation data, managing multiple hazard risks, worker comfort and compliance, standardizing PPE across tasks or sites, documentation, or is it something else? So we'll give the audience a little bit of time here to make your replies. And as soon as the poll is closed, we'll get the results to pop up and share those with everybody. All right, so we have our results. All right, looks like we've got a distribution here. Top of the list, we see access to data, right, which is helpful to support your selection, right? So compatibility data, permeation data. We also see that fairly equivalent is concerned for multi-hazard risks, comfort and compliance on the part of workers, and standardization. All right, very good. So let's close that and let's keep moving on. So EH professionals are faced with a variety of challenges and pain points, managing many competing responsibilities. There's the regulatory and compliance pressures that need to identify solutions for multi-hazard applications, ensuring worker comfort, which feeds into acceptance, and then training, of course, as well, in terms of proper use of PPE. And also important, and where we hope to come in and help here, is finding PPE vendors that are reliable and capable of providing technical support that you need. And again, we believe that's where DuPont differentiates. We don't sell the garments. We help customers make better protective apparel decisions. Next slide, please. And so now we'll discuss some of the reasons why. Next, we'll be showing you how two tools available from DuPont, SafeSPEC and SafeGUIDE, can help you with your protective clothing selection. Next slide, please. All right, so we'll start out with an overview of SafeSPEC. SafeSPEC is our self-service tool. It's available both as online and mobile applications. It has a built-in algorithm that allows the user to enter a hazard or multiple hazards and the associated exposure scenario in order to identify specific DuPont garment solutions. So this app will allow access to our chemical permeation database, which is the largest among the protective apparel manufacturers, as well as detailed product information, as well as access to a large variety of technical resources. Additionally, there are selector tools that can provide documentation that you can subsequently use for regulatory compliance purposes. And here on the slide, the address is shown, www.safespec.dupont.com. And both Chrome and Edge are the recommended browsers in order to access SafeSPEC. And then also provided here are QR codes for iPhones and Android phones in order to download the mobile app. And the mobile app is available on your phone to allow you access to vital information anytime, anywhere, regardless of your connection. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to be showing a video demonstrating using SafeSPEC to assess and identify acceptable garment options for a scenario involving pump out from acid waste tank that contains 25% hydrofluoric acid and 50% nitric acid pumping out into drums. Now we're going to see that there is permeation test data for multiple concentrations for both these chemicals, okay? And we're going to see the data for all the concentrations. And please take note that the data is only applicable for concentrations that are at or above the use concentration. Data for concentrations that's provided that is less than the use concentration are not acceptable for consideration. All right, so if we can, let's please run the video. All right, at the top, you've got a shortcut drop-down where we can choose for hazard selector search. There is first agreement to the conditions of use. Then we get a pop-up here to the default where we can enter chemical hazards by typing in the names. The more letters you type, the more exact it is. So again, based on concentration, we're going to select hydrofluoric acid 48 to 51%. Same thing for nitric acid. There is no 50%, so we have to go up. We're selecting 70%. So again, we have our two hazards identified. We're going to proceed to the next step, which is to review the permeation data. We get a pop-up that tells us, even though you selected certain concentrations, since there are multiple concentrations for these chemicals, you're getting all that data. And you can see it's listed here, starting with the highest concentration, moving down to the lowest concentration for both HF and nitric acid. And remember, as I said, it's data only at or above the use concentration that will be considered. Series of questions that defines our exposure scenario. First, asking, is there a fire risk? The answer is no in this case. We're going to pick moderate spray splash as the hazard risk. 15 minutes, understanding that if anybody gets exposed, they stop, they go to a safety shower, and they rinse off. And as far as the direction of exposure, direct to the torso. And do we need biological protection? The answer is no. We click the next step, and then we get results of DuPont products that meet the scenario, starting with the minimally acceptable option and then moving up through our portfolio. So again, you can see a significant number of options that would be available to you. This scenario could be saved on SafeSPEC for future reference once you come back. And then we also can print as a PDF or as a hard copy print these results. And again, it's an excellent chance to use this as documentation for your selection decisions. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so now we'll talk about SafeGUIDE. SafeGUIDE is a no-fee, value-added service providing on-site field assessments supported by our CIH team. In some cases, a responsible regional sales manager will visit a site to make observations and collect information for subsequent review by a certified industrial hygienist team member. For more complex assessments, a CIH team member will join the DuPont rep in the field to perform the site assessment. In both these cases, the result is a customized report providing guidance on the available DuPont protective apparel based on the site assessment, as well as the opportunity to access various other follow-on support. The comprehensive process starts with defining the scope of the assessment. Okay, is this an assessment involving a single operation? and a single chemical, or is it more complex, multiple operations and multiple hazards? Consequently, we'll have a pre-visit meeting that allows us to determine how much time will be needed for the on-site work and what technical resources will be needed to be devoted up front. And during this meeting, we'll also request permission to take photos and videos, which if allowed will enhance the quality of the assessment. Next, the on-site visit will be conducted, and now we'll be collecting assessment information, taking photos again if allowed, and making observations for the targeted operations. The third step takes place remotely, and this is where the collected data is reviewed and the selection guidance is developed by our technical team. And finally, the final step involves providing a detailed report with protective apparel and product guidance, as well as opening the door for follow-up support such as employee training. And as I mentioned previously, this report can serve as documentation for your regulatory compliance purposes and support of your PPE selection decisions. Next slide, please. So what is the best way for you to differentiate when to use and leverage these two tools? So SafeSPEC is a self-service tool that helps users with selection by providing access perhaps to the database to determine permeation resistance for a specific chemical of concern, or maybe you want to search for a particular Tychem or Tyvek product in the catalog, or perhaps you're seeking access to a technical resource of interest. On the other hand, SafeGUIDE is a no-fee service providing you with direct access to DuPont technical expertise that can help you with specific challenges, such as assessing new chemicals or processes at your site, perhaps addressing issues related to an injury or a near-miss incident, or perhaps reviewing your existing job hazard assessments. Bottom line, SafeSPEC helps with user selection, and SafeGUIDE helps customers standardize and validate your protective apparel process. Next slide, please. And together, the two tools are meant to assist you building a safer workplace and achieving better compliance. Next slide, please. All right. Now it's time for our second poll question. So when was the last time your site reviewed or reassessed your PPE program? Was it recently, within the last year, 1 to 3 years, more than 3 years? It's only based on an incident or management of change, or perhaps you're not sure. So again, we'll give a little bit of time here for people to make their choices. All right. Let's close out. Let's see what we get. All right. Nice to see that we've got most of the responses are on the front end here, right? Within the past year, that is the top winner. Again, great to see. Within the last 1 to 3 years is next. 3 years or more, according to incidents and so forth, and unsure a little bit less. But again, very good to see that people are keeping on top of assessing their PPE needs. All right, let's close and move on to the next one. All right. So now we'll move on to present an actual case study that I participated in that demonstrates the value with a SafeGUIDE engagement. Of course, names have been changed, protect the innocent, but this case study involves a chemical company we're referred to as ABC Chemical. They are a global chemical company. And for this particular engagement, the site had a new EH&S manager, we'll call him Tom. And so getting up to speed by reviewing, safety program documents and PPE documents and so forth, he realized that the site really hadn't done a safety PPE assessment quite some time, over 10 years, right? And he felt overwhelmed by this. And so he subsequently reached out to his local DuPont rep for support. So we had our pre-visit meeting. We determined that we were going to need 1 day on site. And during the course of that day, we were able to evaluate 7 operations, right? Now we're going to walk through the results of 2 of the operations and show the actual assessment data. So the first activity we're reviewing is a tank unloading operation involving 2 mercaptoethanol. So here is a summary of the hazard risk assessment for the operation. So again, we're dealing with a chemical hazard, a liquid chemical hazard. Mercaptoethanol for this particular operation presented a contact exposure, but no inhalation exposure. There's concern for a spray or splash during the course of a tanker transfer. They offload about 4 tankers a day. Not all of them are necessarily mercaptoethanol. Again, this was the specific offload that we evaluated. So concern from contact was upper, lower fronts of the body. The offloading operation typically takes an hour or a little bit more. And in the case of mercaptoethanol, it is not a flammability hazard. As far as the protective garments, the operator wore a hooded coverall, but we noted in our observations that the hood was not needed, and so consequently it was not used. The total of protective clothing being used was an FR uniform. This particular site uses FR work uniforms as their standard uniform. And again, we had a Tychem 2000 coverall over the top of that. Additionally, face shield and goggles. Again, no respirator because there was not an inhalation concern. Gloves, chemical gloves, safety shoes, and a hard hat. Okay. So here was a case where we were able to leverage our mobile app and use it in the field in order to access SafeSPEC to determine, is the Tychem 2000 coverall an acceptable option when you're handling mercaptoethanol? Now we're going to be playing a brief video that demonstrates the app that we use to perform, again, a hazard selector search, very similar to what we saw for the web version, in order to identify options to consider for mercaptoethanol and the related exposure scenario. So we're going to play that video now. We're going to launch the app. Agree. We're going to go to selector tools, and we're going to do a hazard selector search, same as we did with the web version. We're going to type in chemical name, same way. The more letters, we identify what we're looking for. There we have mercaptoethanol. We add that. We answer our exposure scenario questions: fire, no; moderate, spray, splash; 75-minute exposure; exposure localized, front of the body. And again, we don't need any concern for biological hazards. So based on this hazard search, we see we are coming up with Tychem 6000 and Tychem 6000 SFR as acceptable options to consider. So we did not see any options for Tychem 2000 being offered. Now, that could have been the case for a number of reasons. Perhaps the Tychem 2000 doesn't meet the required permeation resistance, or perhaps it doesn't meet some of the other requirements associated with the exposure scenario. So this particular search did not isolate the permeation test data for mercaptorethanol. However, if we were to do a permeation search and were to review the permeation data specific for mercaptoethanol, we would see that Tychem 2000 fabric was not tested. Therefore, there was no data. Therefore, we cannot really consider options for 2000 because of this. And the reason that the Tychem 2000 fabric was not tested is the target protection for that particular fabric is acids, bases, and aqueous solutions. It really is not geared towards, it is not protective for organic chemicals like mercaptoethanol. Okay, next slide. So now when we look at the analysis and guidance, again, based on what we've collected for data, we offered both the Tychem 6000 and Tychem 6000 SFR options for consideration. Now, you may ask yourself, if the assessment did not identify a fire hazard, again, for mercaptoethanol, then why are we offering an SFR, which is a secondary flame-resistant option? And the reason for that is even though mercaptoethanol is not flammable, it's really only one of many materials that are offloaded using tanker trucks. And many of the materials that they do offload are flammable liquids. So by offering SFR options, we can offer a single solution that applies for a broader range of activities that are associated with the unloading operation. Next slide, please. So the second activity we'll review is the charging of sodium hydroxide as a caustic solid to an outdoor tank. So this is, a very different scenario involving a particle hazard versus the liquid chemical hazard associated with the tanker unloading. So again, from a hazard type, we're talking about particle, solid, sodium hydroxide. So when reviewing the procedure for this operation, as far as PPE, there was a specification for a secondary FR garment to be worn over their primary FR clothing. However, when we interviewed the person doing the operation, the individual stated that, hey, the SFR garment is no longer used. So consequently, he did not use it. The operation involves dumping of 50-pound bags into the tank. And we were told that, it could be a light dusting, escaping, especially in windy situations. And the operator stated, again, if they do get exposed to the dust, that they may have to end up changing that FR uniform if they're not wearing that overgarment. All right. So in this case, the exposure concerns were both inhalation and contact. The operation takes place 2 times per shift, and they have 2 shifts. The contact, again, is the upper front of the body. It is light contact, and it's a very short duration operation. It only takes about 5 minutes. As I said, the particular worker this day strictly wore their FR uniform. They were wearing a half-mask respirator. The procedure also called for a face shield and goggles. which we noted also were not worn for the operation, but they were wearing their gloves, safety shoes, and the hard hat. So, a key fact that we learned once we spoke with the EH&S staff was indeed that they were reevaluating whether the activity was posing a fire risk. And so the current requirement for an SFR garment that we read in the procedure over that primary work uniform may not be required in the future. But unfortunately, there was no decision at the time we made this visit. So, as I stated, in our case, the worker did just wear solely that FR primary work uniform. Next slide, please. So you can see from the guidance we offered that this uncertainty of whether an SFR garment or a non-SFR odor garment was going to be required in the future really was not a challenge for us, since we're able to provide both options. And again, we could see here that we could provide options as a full body coverall, or if they decided that they were more interested in just upper body protection. And you can see we have a frock or a sleeved apron that they can consider and choose from. Next slide. I'm going to end my portion of the presentation by reviewing what the deliverable SafeGUIDE report looks like. And by the way, this example will be available to you for future reference. We start with a cover page that will list the customer, the distributor, the DuPont, and all their contact information. This is followed by a second page, a summarization of all the product considerations that were identified by the assessment, along with links for ordering information. And then the remaining series of pages are summaries detailing the assessments and guidance for each operation evaluated during the site visit. So this previous case study, there would have been 7 individual assessments for 7 individual operations. And again, we reviewed 2 of those. Next slide. And again, this shows more information, the deeper dive into guidance being applied for each of these operations. And when appropriate, the guidance will include permeation data, which supports the solutions that are being offered, along with extensive product details for each offering. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my friend Aaron to finish up. Take it away, Aaron.
Thank you, Mark. Now, I'm going to get into the benefits of SafeGUIDE. Next slide, please. Now, SafeGUIDE was developed for companies like chemical manufacturing companies Mark mentioned earlier to mitigate risks and maximize compliance. SafeGUIDE does this in 4 key ways. First, provides consistency in establishing a standardized way to select selective apparel. Second, workplace safety support by providing proactive safety measures to avoid injury. And third, cost effectiveness in streamlining the selection process, which helps reduce costs. And lastly, the compliance needed to equip companies like yours with OSHA-aligned job hazard analysis. Next slide, please. Now, we're going to focus on DuPont's protective apparel solutions for chemical manufacturing sites. Next slide. All right, here is my poll question. The poll question is, how confident are you that your current protective garments account for both chemical exposure and FR flash fire requirements where applicable? 1, very confident, somewhat confident, not very confident, we are currently reassessing this, or not applicable to my site. We'll give some time to answer those questions. All right. There you go. Somewhat confident takes the lead. And with 39% and not applicable to my site comes in second place. And then we're currently reassessing this. Yes. That's a good answer. That's you're questioning hazards at your sites, and for if you feel like you have these hazards, I'm going to go over, give you guys some information, but also connect with the DuPont RSM or a CIH manager like a Mark. Next slide, please. Those are good answers, guys. Now, this Venn diagram connects common chemical manufacturing hazards with DuPont protective apparel options, and also shows that workers at your site can be exposed to multiple hazards. Now, if your site has hazardous particles, which is shown in my screen says upper left hand side, consider Tyvek 400, Tychem 2000. However, if there is a potential flash fire exposure, select our Tyvek 400 SFR or our Tychem 2000 SFR. If your site has hazardous liquid chemicals, like in the right-hand side of the Venn diagram, upper right-hand side, consider our Tychem 2000 or our Tychem 6000. However, again, if there is an FR exposure, select Tychem 2000 SFR or Tychem 6000 SFR. Again, when it comes to flash fire environments, DuPont manufactures and sells SFR, that is secondary fire-resistant protective clothing. SFR is to be worn over primary FR, that is flame-resistant, garments in a multi-hazard environments, adding protections from particulates and liquid chemicals without compromising burn protection. Just like that bottom Venn diagram shows in the red, if you feel you're if you are in an FR environment, DuPont SFR protective clothing will be needed in these hazardous particulate or liquid chemical environments. Now, we have two quick questions to help determine if you're in an FR environment. First one, does your site currently wear or in need of FR or flame-resistant clothing? Secondly, are there flash fire hazards during your task, your worker's task? If yes, one of our DuPont SFR garments is recommended. Next slide, please. Now we'll go a little bit deeper and connect hazards that you guys might have to the right DuPont protective clothing family. These next three slides kind of demonstrate some of our protective clothing options. However, we do have other styles and configurations like sleep aprons that will fit your needs. If your site has particle hazards such as asbestos, lead, combustible dust, we have two options. First, our Tyvek 400, which provides a great balance of protection, durability, and comfort, and an inherent barrier to particles down to 1 micron. If SFR is needed in this environment, choose our Tyvek 400 SFR. It's going to give the same particle protection, but also with that secondary FR protection. One key differences is that our Tyvek 400 SFR does come with red seams, zipper, and patch details that distinguish it from our regular Tyvek 400. Now, I'm going to say this 3 times. This is the first one. Remember, SFR protective clothing must be worn over primary FR clothing. That's the first time. 2 more times. Next slide, please. If your site has chemical hazards such as sulfuric acid or sodium hydroxide, choose our Tychem 2000. It provides lightweight chemical protection against inorganic acids, bases, and cleaning chemicals. Again, however, if you're in a FR environment, choose our Tychem 2000 SFR. Again, it offers that same chemical protection against inorganic chemicals, as well as providing secondary FR protection. Again, second time I say this, SFR protective clothing are to be worn over primary FR clothing. Next slide, please. Lastly, if your site has chemical hazards such as hydrocarbons and other organic solvent, we have our Tychem 6000. It offers at least 30 minutes of protection against more than 250 chemical challenges. Again, if you are in a FR environment, choose our Tychem 6000 SFR, which is on the right, the yellow suit, as it provides the protection against 250 chemical challenges, as well providing that secondary FR protection. This is the last time I say it, but again, we must put in our head, SFR protective clothing are to be worn over primary FR clothing. Next slide, please. Now, Mark and I have taken a deep dive into how SafeSPEC and SafeGUIDE are to be used to solve problems in the chemical manufacturing industry. Next slide. Now, here's the key takeaways. EH&S managers, safety managers, just like you, need help navigating challenging protective clothing decisions. SafeSPEC and SafeGUIDE give you credible tools so that you can make informed decisions. SafeGUIDE provides a repeatable process of define, assess, and analyze, and guide. The case study Mark presented shows how these tools can turn a safety challenge into a supportive product recommendation. These tools help match hazards with the right protective clothing, and it leads you to a big payoff of standardized, compliant protection. Next slide, please. Now, the value is clear. Now the ask is simple. We want you guys to put these programs into use. First, with our SafeSPEC, download the app or go on our website and play with it. Use it, use its data, create hazard situations. If you need help, please connect with one of DuPont's regional sales managers or one of our CIHs for training or guidance. Secondly, schedule a time for your SafeGUIDE assessment. Partner up with a DuPont regional sales manager, with a DuPont national account manager, or with a DuPont CIH like Mark, and schedule a SafeGUIDE assessment. Usually, the question is when to do these assessments. Our ask is, if we haven't completed one this year, schedule assessment. If we haven't completed one in a year, schedule assessment. If you're adding a new process, a chemical task or facility, schedule a SafeGUIDE assessment. Or if you want to improve your protection, standardize your apparel, reduce costs, or strengthen your compliance, schedule a SafeGUIDE assessment. We're here to help. That is it. Any questions? Or I think Scott's been having questions. There you go.
Yeah, that's great. We definitely had a few questions going on. Again, want to thank everybody for joining today. We'll get into the questions now. So if you haven't found them, down at the bottom it says more. There's 3 dots. You can click there. You should see Q&A in that section, and you should be able to enter your questions there. So Christina had a question. I tried using the Safeguard tool, but it's prompting for a login rather than being accessible as a tool library library. Based on the walkthrough, she thought it might be open source. Can you expand on how to access it and how to use it?
This is Mark. I'll take a first crack at that. Is it the SafeGUIDE or the SafeSPEC um, tool that you were trying to access? I think we need some clarification there. Um, uh, you you are asked to, well, uh, SafeSPEC is open source. You do not have to register for that. SafeGUIDE, I believe, to request a SafeGUIDE, you may have to register for that. Aaron, do you know more of the details as far as
Yeah, I think
requesting a SafeGUIDE?
yeah, I think you have to request that. I think you have to request that.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're having any troubles, Christina, or we'll have Mark and
We'll do a
Aaron's
follow-up. Yeah, we'll do a
contact
follow-up.
information. We'll definitely follow up, make sure that you can access that. So the next question was what happens if the specific chemicals we're using or the specific chemical we're using isn't listed in the database in the SafeSPEC?
Sure, I'll take that question as well. Well, I did mention that DuPont does have the largest permeation database of any of the chemical manufacturers, so upwards to almost 3,000 permeation tests. But despite that, we know that there are honestly tens of thousands of chemicals that are used in the chemical industry and across broader industries. So it's not uncommon at all to come across a chemical where we don't have direct permeation data. And again, this is where the CIH team, helps out you as a customer. The permeation database, our permeation database is segregated into chemical classes. And ASTM has established about its 23 or 24 chemical classes. So if we have a chemical where we don't have direct data, somebody from the CIH team will determine what chemical class, or sometimes it's multiple chemical classes where that chemical resides. And what we do is filter out that data, which ends up being indirect data, right, for your particular chemical. So, right, again, it's data applied to other chemicals that are like your chemical in the same chemical class. So again, we sort out that data and we provide that data to you and help you lead you through making a determination based on indirect data.
It's great. I've got a couple more questions. I just dropped in the chat the Safeopedia community link. We have a free community platform where we encourage people to ask questions like this, and we'll help track down answers unless one of your peers has the answers available for you. So if you haven't yet joined the Safeopedia community, take a second and hit that link. Like I said, it is free to join, and we do have conversations like this on a regular basis. So the next question we had was around SafeSPEC again, and it is, when is SafeSPEC enough on its own? And when should a site consider SafeGUIDE on-site assessment?
I could answer. I could take a stab at first. I say in both scenarios, you would want to, because we're here to help, you would want for the SafeSPEC, you can go use SafeSPEC to get details on what garment to particularly use. But I would still say connect with either a regional sales manager or a CIH like Mark, just to get a little bit more detailed information about, like the chemical and what you're going to the garments that you're going to associate with that chemical. And then also with the SafeGUIDE, again, as a regional sales manager, I want to do my best to make sure that you and your employees are well taken care of and know how to use our product. So again, it's that once a year. So if you haven't done it once a year, do the SafeGUIDE once a year. with a regional sales manager or CIH. And if you are adding a new process, new chemical, new people, training, we are here to help you guys as well too. So anything new, anything improved, anything changing, get us involved so that we could help you in that process.
Yeah.
And I guess I would add to that, I think that depends on your level of experience and your level of confidence. So, again, if you've got that level of experience and confidence, again, you've got a documentation that is all printable from SafeSPEC. Again, the web-based SafeSPEC, those permeation data tables are all printable, and your hazard selector search, again, as we demonstrated, is all printable that you can have as documentation supporting your selection decisions. So again, if you want some additional support beyond that, as Aaron has said, feel free to reach out to somebody on the sales team or somebody on the CIH team.
Yeah, and I know in my experience with our community, talking to a senior safety professional who was responsible for a large facility, talking about the regularity of assessments or inspections like you did earlier in the poll question. He was saying, if one of the DuPont reps is available to come out and help with that, it's just one more thing they don't have to worry about. They're already stretched so thin and have so many different priorities and initiatives on their plate that you guys are there to help out and make their lives easier, right? So definitely encourage people to reach out for those on-site assessments, because I know you're happy to do them and obviously extremely experienced at them as well. So we've got a few more questions. We're coming up to the hour, but I think you guys are probably okay to stay for a few extra minutes if the questions keep rolling in. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So the next question was, how long does the SafeGUIDE process take from submitting the initial request from receiving the final report?
I'm willing to talk about that first, and then Aaron can add on to what I say. And a lot of that depends on availability, right, and in coordinating availability between different groups. So I would say, as far as the quickest, it's going to be where the regional sales manager, someone such as Aaron or one of his colleagues, comes out, right? They're in the field constantly. They are more available to you at your sites, and it's as quick as you can make arrangements there. As far as, conducting the actual assessment, collecting data and turning a report around, again, our assessments on site time probably ranges between a half a day and 2 days. And then once we get that information back and we analyze that and put that into a report, I would say we're talking 2 to 3 weeks to generate that final report.
Great.
Aaron, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, correct. That's the process really starts with just communicating with us that you want it, scheduling that day for somebody to come out to do that assessment, getting all the right information, chemicals, everything, getting that information, then getting that information over to Mark so he can analyze it and then make his recommendations.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with that pre-visit prep work, right?
Right.
Again, the more you can get done on that pre-visit prep, the quicker the process will go. So in other words, if safety data sheets are available in advance versus waiting to get those in order to do your analysis and so forth, again, there's different ways you can expedite the process.
Yeah, that's fair. Great. Patty's shared some resources, the SafeSPEC link and the SafeGUIDE link as well. So that's in the chat if people haven't already connected with that. I've got another question I'm going to go to, but before I do, I know Andy had their hand up since the beginning of the webinar, so I'm not sure if they have a question or if it was accidentally raised, but Andy, if you're there and you still have a question, if you can throw it in the Q&A section, we'll do our best to get it. I know sometimes people on mobile have issues with Zoom getting to the Q&A, so you can also send a chat to the panelists if you want to get your question answered that way. But the last question I have in the Q&A at the moment is, are the garments also tested against chemical vapor?
There are chemical vapors that are tested that you can find in the database. Things like ammonia, chlorine, and a variety of other things. So when you go in the database and you enter a particular chemical, and ammonia is a great example because again, you'll find data for gaseous ammonia, liquefied ammonia, and ammonium hydroxide solution. So again, it just depends on what your hazard is and what physical state you're dealing with. And sometimes you're dealing with multiple physical states.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's all the active questions that we have. We'll reach out to Andy afterwards and see if they had a question that we just didn't get to. But thank you again to Mark and Aaron for joining us today, for DuPont for sponsoring this educational webinar. It is being recorded. We'll have it available on demand if you want to share that with your coworkers, or if you want to come back and revisit your favorite section of the webinar today, you'll be able to do that. And and again, encourage you. We'll include Mark and Aaron's coordinates in the description when we post that on demand. So if you want to reach out and connect with them, definitely encourage you to do that. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to join us today, and thanks again to Mark and Aaron for sharing their expertise.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.